Hello there and welcome to a brand new lesson. This is Hub Beyond Numbers where we learn maths the easy way. In this lesson, we are looking at the question 2B of BECE 2026 and it's on profit sharing, specifically on the strand, ratio, and proportion, including fractions. On our left-hand side, we have solutions to the trial exercises of the previous lesson that was on question 2A. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to extract relevant facts from multi-part word problem. You should be able to deduct fixed manager's share before sharing the remainder by ratio. And then finally, you should be able to calculate each partner's total earning. Without much ado, let's quickly look into it. So let's start with the question. It says Joyce and Richard contributed 10,000 cedis and 5,000 cedis respectively to start a business. They agreed that Richard will be paid 1/3 of the profit as manager, and the rest will be shared in the ratio of their contribution. If the profit of 9,000 was made, how much does, first of all, Joyce receive? And then secondly, how much does Richard receive? This is a question on ratio and proportion. So before we look at it, let's quickly look at the key concepts we need to understand. When you are sharing a ratio, you first find the total number of parts. So when we talk of total number of parts, if you are sharing any quantity in the ratio, let's say 2:5, then the part simply refers to 2 plus 5. That is the total number of parts. So the parts are in twos and then in fives. Hence, the total number of fives will be 2 plus 5, which will then give you what? A 7. You first of all need to find this. If you're able to get the total number of parts, that helps you to get what each person gets. And how do we do that? We just multiply by each person's share. You see? So if you want to apply this concept in sharing profits, we will first need to find the total profit. Now, if we get the total profit, we now take out the manager's fee. And the manager's fee is simply a fraction of the total profit. So if we take out what the manager will take, which is a constant, then we now find the remaining profit. And the remaining profit is with respect to the ratio of their contribution. You see? So let's look at applying these concepts to this question. Now let's write out the parameters we have from the question. So first of all, there is Joyce. And Joyce actually contributed a 10,000. You see? And then with that, we have Richard. Richard, on the other hand, contributed a 5,000 cedis. Now, take note that Joyce is just a contributor. And then Richard, on the other hand, is the manager and also the contributor. That is from the question. Also, we have the total profit here. So our total profit is going to be what? The 9,000. Now, it says they agreed that Richard will be paid 1/3 of the profit as a manager. So let's call that the manager's fee. So we say the manager's fee is simply going to be what? 1/3. So 1/3 times 1/3 of the profit. So 1/3 times 9,000. And if you have to evaluate that, we get a 3,000 cedis. So that is to say, after the profit was obtained, a fixed amount is going to the manager. So we would say Richard's first share is the 3,000 cedis. Now, what happens to the profit? you see that there will be a remaining profit. So let's call that the profit remains. And how do we get the remaining profit? That is going to be the total profit, which was the 9,000 minus Richard's share, which would be what, 3,000. And evaluating that gives us a 6,000. Now it is this 6,000 cedis that is going to be shared in the given ratio. You see, so there we are told that it is going to be shared in the ratio of their contributions. In the ratio of their contributions. So we would first need to get the ratio of contribution. So let's come here and say our ratio of contribution. Now, if we want it as Joyce is to Richard, then this is how it's going to be. So we have Joyce is to Richard. And as you can see from the question, Joyce contributed a 10,000. So it becomes a 10,000 is to Richard's share, which was what? 5,000. So if we are to simplify this further, we are going to get a ratio of, so you just cancel out the zeros. 3 of the zeros cancel out, and then we have 10 is to 5. 10 is to 5 can be simplified further as 2 is to 1. So we have ratio of contribution being what? 2 is to 1. We said to get each portion, we would have to find the total part, sometimes called the total ratio. So our total part or total ratio is going to be equal to a 2 plus 1, which gives us what? A 3. So there are 3 parts in total. So we now have all we need. We can find for Joyce's share with respect to the total ratio and Richard's share. So for Joyce's share, it's going to be her ratio, which is 2. So we have 2 over the total ratio, which is 3, then times the profit that remains. So that is our 6,000. There are 2 ways of doing this. You could have divided this, which is the remaining profit, by 3, and by so doing you get how much one part represents. If you're able to get that for Joyce's share, you just multiply the one part by her ratio and then get your answer. And then for Richard's share, you'd also multiply the one part by Richard's and then you'd get your answer. But this is also fine. So 2 over 3 times 600. We have our 3 dividing 6 twice. And that gives us a 2,000. 2,000 times 2 then gives us a 4,000. So it means Joyce's share is actually 4,000. What then will Richard's share be? So for Richard's share, we have Richard's ratio, which is 1 over 3. And then we multiply that by the 6,000. You see? And that as well gives us a 2,000. So let's not forget the currency. So back to the question, it says, how much does Joyce receive? That is I. So we conclude by saying Joyce received what? This amount over here. So we say, therefore, Joyce received 4,000 cedis. Now the second part of the question says, Richard, how much does Richard also receive in total? Remember, Richard being the manager received an amount as the manager's fee, which was what? 3,000. Before, he also received an amount as a contributor. You see, so to get Richard's total share, then that is going to be the amount he receives as a manager, then plus the amount he also receives as a contributor. And that is going to be the 2,000. That is what he received as a contributor, plus what he received as a manager, which was a 3,000. And adding that gives us a 5,000. So if you look at what we have here critically, it means even though Richard contributed less, is gaining an overall total which is greater than how much Joyce is receiving, though she contributed majority part of the money. This is because Richard has taken upon himself to actually manage the business. Because without him managing, there might even not be a profit. You see. So this ends question 2B of the BECE 2026. As usual, I'll leave you with some exercises so that you try your best to enhance your understanding by solving them. So you have 5 questions based on what we've done so far, and I do hope you'll be able to do them. The answers will be reviewed at the start of the next lesson, and you can always check that to confirm your answers. This is how Beyond Numbers will learn maths the easy way. If there's any issue of concern, you can always let me know at the comment section. You can also check on my YouTube page where I've treated all the lessons as regard to the syllabus. See you in our next lesson where we look at question 3A. Bye for now and do stay safe.